Chapter 32 is the basic principles of animal form and function. Part 1 of Chapter 32 goes over basic anatomy and physiology of animals, the diverse forms and different challenges of organ systems. So first we need to know what the definitions of anatomy and physiology are, because they're often used hand in hand together. Anatomy is the study of the biological form of an organism. So anatomy is just the structure. Physiology is the study of the biological functions an organism performs. Now, something that's super important, knowing that these two words go hand in hand, the structure or the anatomy dictates the function or the physiology. So that would be a sentence that you should definitely remember. Anatomy dictates the physiology, or the structure dictates the function. Common theme throughout the book has been evolution by the process of natural selection. So again, it's going to pop up here and there, and knowing that the structure is going to dictate the function of the trait or organ in this case, looking at this hare or this rabbit, immediately I would think, oh my gosh, this bunny rabbit can hear really good because its ears are ginormous. But in this case, the purpose of this rabbit who lives in the desert is not how well it can hear, but rather all the blood that's traveling through the ears. It's able to release heat. And a bunny that's hopping through the desert is going to have tons of body heat, could possibly overheat. The ears are so big, which they give off that heat, allowing the bunny's body to stay at homeostasis and to keep the bunny alive. So again, throughout time, these rabbits who possibly didn't have ginormous ears, they maybe would not have survived, and then they couldn't have passed on their small-eared genes. But this rabbit who has the bigger ears is able to keep homeostasis within its body, stays around, and is able to pass on its trait for having those ginormous ears. So I've already said how animal form and function are correlated, but they're also correlated at different levels of organization. So the size and the shape affect the way that an animal interacts with its environment and staying around to pass its genes on to future generations. And many different animal body plans have evolved and are determined by the genome, which I already mentioned on the previous slide with the rabbit. So we've seen the hierarchy of organization of body plans since general biology, knowing that cells put together and that have a similar look and function make up a tissue. When you have the tissue working together, it's going to be called an organ. And when you have different organs that essentially serve the same function together, it's called an organ system. So that's something that we've already known. But what you need to know from this point on, especially for this unit again is basically different organ systems. It's about anatomy and physiology, and going into the next unit it'll be the same. So these are the organ systems. You need to know the components. You need to know the function. And this is a non-negotiable table, this table 32.1. It's also found on page 664, so please memorize it. So again, some of these we already know, the digestive system, and then just to read the list, circulatory, respiratory, immune and lymphatic, excretory, which is going to be in this chapter, endocrine, which is also in this chapter, reproductive, nervous is going to be touched on in this chapter, integumentary, skeletal, and muscular. So again, please make a note, a special note, to memorize and know this table. Mentioning how tissues make up organs and organ systems, essentially, there are four main types, and there is overlap. These tissues aren't exclusive necessarily with one organ system or one organ. So again, the body works together, the tissues do too, and these are the four main types. The first is epithelial. It covers the outside of the body and lines the organs and the cavities within the body. Connective tissue binds and supports other tissues, cartilage, tendons, ligaments, bone, blood, and adipose. Muscle controls body movement, skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. And nervous tissue senses stimuli and transmits signals throughout the animal. Neurons and glia are examples, and I will get into more on all four of these in just a moment. Here is a picture with a wolf showing you that epithelial tissue can show up in different places and look slightly different depending on the layout. Now, something that you should know about epithelial tissue is that it's polarized. So there's two different kinds of epithelial tissue depending on where it's located. So the first kind is apical or apical. So this is epithelial tissue that faces the inside of the body cavity. So it is usually in contact with fluid or air inside. Basal epithelial tissue is going to be underlying or kind of on the deep inside of the tissue, not exposed to air or to fluid. Now, some of the main functions of epithelial tissue is that it's a barrier against mechanical or like physical injury. Also, it prevents against fluid loss. So we see this within our digestive system, which is being shown here. And so not being able to lose fluid is really important for our digestive system and for our bodies. Epithelial tissue also protects our body from pathogens. So things like bacteria, viruses, or any other microorganisms that could cause us harm and disease. This diagram of the wolf shows muscle tissue, and that again, it can show up in different places. So there are three types of muscle tissue: skeletal, smooth, and cardiac. So cardiac, you can see it's located in the walls of the heart muscle, and it's primarily made of proteins, two proteins in particular, actin and myosin, which allow the heart to contract. The other two types of muscle tissue, smooth muscle. Smooth muscle is responsible for involuntary movement. So things like your intestines and stomach contracting to move food throughout it, and so that way you can eventually go to the bathroom. That's involuntary movement. It just occurs. The other muscle type, skeletal muscle, that, as you can see, it's in the leg, that's responsible for voluntary movement. So I want to walk. I want to lift my arm up in the air and wave at somebody. Skeletal muscle is responsible for that. The main function of connective tissue is for support, and it can look different depending on where exactly you're looking at it. But overall, it's a type of cell that's in a matrix that can be a web of fibers, it can be jelly-like, or it can be solid. So each of these examples that I'm going to go through are very different, but the primary function, again, is for support. So I'll start over in the upper left-hand corner. Collagenous fibers. So this is the type of tissue that holds skin to the organs. It holds organs in place. So it provides support that way. Fibrous connective tissues. Two examples of fibrous connective tissues, tendons and ligaments. So tendons are the type of tissue that holds muscles to bone, and ligaments, still being fibrous connective tissue, they hold two bones together. Again, both examples of connective tissue. Now, oddly, a bone does fit into this category. So a bone, again, definitely provides support. It's hardened minerals, but within the minerals, so minerals, again, we know calcium, being number one, magnesium phosphate, but also being made of a matrix, again, like a web of collagen. And collagen is something that I should have mentioned before. Collagen is one of the main proteins produced by a cell in connective tissue. The cell is called a fibroblast. So again, fibroblasts, just to kind of backtrack, is a type of cell that's located in connective tissue and produces collagen, which we're going to see collagen, even though I didn't mention it, in all of these examples. Another type of connective tissue is adipose tissue, and this is responsible for storing fat. Another type, the fifth type, is cartilage, again, which is a type of connective tissue. So cartilage, similar to bone, but not as hardened and firm, but soft, if that makes sense. So your ears are made of cartilage, your nose made of cartilage. So you'd think it's bone, but it's not necessarily. Another type, which no way would I think that this is connective tissue, but again, jelly-like in this case. And there's a matrix of fibers going on in blood where the plasma, and then obviously being made of different types of cells, is also, plasma does provide support for the blood system or circulatory system.